5 women: Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, Mary McClintock, Martha Coffin Wright, and Jane Hunt, gathered at Mrs. Hunt's home in Waterloo, New York on July 3, 1848, for afternoon tea. While sipping tea, they complained about the many injustices that American society imposed upon all women. There and then, they decided to do something about it. Elizabeth Cady Stanton volunteered to write a manifesto describing their grievances and demands. She fashioned the document after the Declaration of Independence and called it the Declaration of Sentiments, beginning with, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." She even dared to include the most controversial issue among the 11 resolutions, calling upon women to secure the right to vote. The 5 women decided to call a meeting, to speak out about the issues, to read the document, and solicit others to sign on. Thus, the first Women's Rights Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York, in 1848, and the women's rights movement of the United States was launched. It started back in Seneca Falls. We won't forget the date. 150 years ago, in 1848. They met, they planned, they stirred some tea, then stirred a revolution, a convention which set women free, then changed the Constitution. It took 72 years from the 1848 convention until 1920 for women to be able to vote. Those who held the first convention had passed away, but there were thousands of women involved in the struggle. Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Carrie Chapman Catt, Alice Paul, Susan B. Anthony. One of Susan B.'s slogans was, "Failure is impossible." "Failure is impossible, I will not toe the line." Susan cast her ballot, then refused to pay the fine. Stanton said the church was liable for keeping women down, so she wrote the Women's Bible, causing ministers to frown. Another woman at that convention in 1848 was Lucretia Mott. Lucretia was a Quaker. Faith told her what to do, belief in peace and temperance and abolition too. She strove for full equality for each and every one. Reform and women's suffrage were the battles to be won. Dress reform was one of many women's rights issues, but Stanton and others gave up the bloomer costume because they were so badly ridiculed that they felt it detracted from the cause. Amelia wore the bloomers. Men said that she looked silly, so she spread the word of women's rights by publishing the Lily. Not all women's rights advocates were white upper-class women. Sojourner was a former slave who spoke on what was true. She asked the crucial question, "Ain't I a woman too? Ain't I a woman too?" Artists were suffragists also. Julia Howe was inspired to write the battle hymn, but she went to war for suffrage. She was sure that we would win. Rose O'Neal created Cupid dolls. Oh, they were quite a sight. But she had those little babies proclaiming women's rights. Carrie Catt led the National Women's Suffrage Group. State by state, they would not let themselves be duped. They lobbied and petitioned and they knocked on every door till those male politicians couldn't take it anymore. They couldn't take it anymore. In 1913, scores of women answered to the call of the National Women's Party, led by Alice Paul. Yes, they picketed the White House in the cold and in the heat. They were dragged to jail and force-fed when they refused to eat. They refused to eat. Leading suffragist parades was a woman atop a white horse, dressed in white flowing robes, carrying a banner which proclaimed "Forward into light." Atop her horse Inez proclaimed, "Forward into light." She was a martyr to the cause, would not give up the fight. In 1916, Inez passed out on the podium while delivering a suffrage speech in Los Angeles. She had persisted in traveling and rallying and speaking out in spite of her ill health. A short time later, she died. 1,000 women honored her. To her funeral they came. Inez Milholland, we won't forget your name. We won't forget your name. In 1920, Tennessee, the final vote was cast, and the 19th Amendment to the Constitution passed. But before casting the deciding vote ratifying the 19th Amendment, Harry Byrne, who had been undecided, read a telegram from his mother. In it, she said, "Be a good boy, Harry, and vote for suffrage. Women now are voting. We are answering to the calls of what began in 1848 in a town called Seneca Falls. It started back in Seneca Falls. We won't forget the date. 150 years ago, in 1848. They met, they planned, they stirred some tea, then stirred a revolution, a convention which set women free, then changed the Constitution. They met, they planned, they stirred some tea, then stirred a revolution.